welcome. I'm Sumy and you are watching NewsX. Well, let's take a look at some of the top stories. US President Donald Trump has vowed not to be intimidated by Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of their high-stakes Alaska summit scheduled for later today, promising Ukraine would be included in any deal even as Kyiv is left out for the talks today. This visit will mark Putin's first visit in US since 2022. Meanwhile, Ukraine has secured the return of 84 prisoners of war, including 33 soldiers and 51 civilians, in its latest swap with Russia, according to the Ukrainian State Committee on POWs. Officials said one prisoner had been held for over 4,000 days, making this one of the most significant exchanges to date. Germany and the EU have urged Israel to halt plans to build thousands of new homes in the West Bank, warning that the controversial E1 settlement project undermines the two-state solution and violates international law. German officials and EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas have strongly rejected the Israeli government's decision. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that Tehran is working with China and Russia to prevent Britain, France, and Germany from reimposing snapback sanctions over its nuclear program, according to local state media. China has urged Cambodia and Thailand to restore peace at their border as soon as possible, reiterating support for a sustainable ceasefire, according to a Chinese Foreign Ministry statement. The call comes after a trilateral meeting which was held yesterday. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has announced the restoration of the 2018 September 19 Comprehensive Military Agreement and halted propaganda efforts against North Korea in a bid to reduce border tensions. Marking the 80th anniversary of Korea's liberation from Japanese rule, Lee also called for pragmatic diplomacy with Japan. Meanwhile, South Korea has expressed deep disappointment and regret over Japanese officials visiting the controversial Yasukuni Shrine on the 80th anniversary of Japan's World War II defeat. Calling for remorse for past wrongs, Seoul has warned that future relations depend on Japan's historical accountability. At least 52 people have been killed and over 100 remain missing after flash floods and landslides swept through the Indian Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi vowed to protect farmers, announced lower GST rates from October, and urged self-reliance in manufacturing amid trade tensions with US President Donald Trump during his speech celebrating Independence Day today. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that a lot was done during U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's visit to Russia last week, and the Russian side hopes to continue this useful conversation during the expected Russia-U.S. summit in Alaska. This comes as the White House has confirmed that the meeting will take place at 11 a.m. Alaska time. Once the meeting concludes, he is expected to depart Anchorage at 5:45 p.m. for the return flight to the White House. President Trump has said that he believes Putin is ready to end the war in Ukraine, but peace would likely require at least a second meeting involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Here's what the Russian Foreign Minister had to say.
Мы никогда не загадываем ничего наперед. Мы знаем, что у нас есть аргумент, у нас есть позиция понятная, четкая. Мы будем ее излагать. Здесь уже немало сделано в ходе визитов Стивена Уиткоффа, президент об этом сказал, и Уиткофф выступал от имени президента Трампа. Надеюсь, что мы сегодня, завтра продолжим это точно.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Shruti Das Gupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, given Lavrov's statement about this useful conversation with Steve Witkoff, what do you think was achieved during this discussion, and how do you think he will leverage this on tonight's discussions?
Greetings, Asuma. I understand that Russia has been very firm on its demands that it will not give up the land that it has taken over. A part of the eastern part of Ukraine will continue to be under Russian control. It wants to demilitarize Ukraine completely. That means at least, if not all, at least all the US aid and the NATO armaments that are there will have to be sent back, and there shall be probably a skeleton army, or if most probably no army at all in Ukraine itself. I believe beyond this, Trump had already hinted at this before. He had said that he likes the critical minerals mines around Donetsk, etc. And these are areas that now Russia dominates. So maybe because he's a businessman more than a politician, Trump would probably have allowed all of this under the fact that Russia would hand over the control of these mines and the mining rights of these certain specific areas to USA, and they will divvy up this Ukrainian melon between themselves and leave the others to pick up the remains of whatever is left of the Ukrainian pride.
Thank you, Shruti, for sharing that. And yesterday also we talked about this, but now President Trump has expressed optimism about Putin's willingness to end this war in Ukraine, but also mentioned the need for further talks with Ukraine's president. So how realistic is this optimism according to you?
Well, Trump in his own statement has said he's 25% sure that it might not work. So there is, he himself going to the table knows that there might be a few concessions or demands that the US or NATO wants to make of Russia, and Putin might not want to participate in those demands. So there is a chance that he might just walk away. Such a specific number probably means that he himself has put forth 4 demands. I think they would probably want to put NATO there in Ukraine, and that would be the hard line, which is the 25% chance that he's talking of, that Russia would probably walk away if the NATO demand is a hard line for USA to broker this peace. Beyond this, I understand that there is going to be, he's hinted that if this particular peace talk or this particular deal between 2 nations is finalized and the sale of Ukrainian land in whichever form is finalized, then the next step would probably be a peace signing deal, because unfortunately for Ukraine, they have Zelensky as their president, and while the decisions and policies come through other NATO nations, European as well as American. So they will have to, while they broker the deal, the signing authority remains with Zelensky, and that is why he will be invited. If this particular deal on the table comes through, then he would be invited to come forth and sign the papers on behalf of the Ukrainian people. And if America says yes, although Zelensky has been sending out many cries on social media and media bites saying that it will not tolerate any exchange of land or favors of Ukraine in return for peace, and they do not want a peace where Ukraine is left at mercy of Russia. I don't think he has any authority in countering anything Trump or NATO or Europe tells him to do. So he will sign peacefully like the vassal state that it is. And that is what the connotations of the second meeting is. So today what comes out of the 30-40 minutes that these 2 leaders interact is what is going to show whether the coming days are going to be peaceful for Ukrainians, although humiliating or not, or whether the war, which has been now 3 years into going, continues forth.
Thank you, Shruti, for sharing that. We'll come back to you after a breaking news. We have some breaking news coming in. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said that Moscow will not make any predictions on the outcome of today's summit between President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin. Speaking to Russian state television after landing in Alaska for the talks, Lavrov has said that Russia's position is clear and unambiguous and will be presented directly during the meeting. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert. Thank you, Shruti, for staying with us. Now, what do you think Lavrov is hinting in when saying that Russia does not change its stance and it stays with its unambiguous stance?
Its unambiguous stance is very clear. I stated earlier, they will retain control of Crimea and the occupied territory of Ukraine. They will demilitarize it. There will be no NATO presence, and there will probably be some exchange of favors, which they will understand. So they will know probably, and also they have, I think there is a clause where they've said that the NATO nations will stop their aggressive posturing. America will stop encircling Russia and its friendly assets by employing NATO as a tactic. So these are a couple of demands that Russia has been repeatedly saying for the past year now. And when he says it's not going to change anything, probably Witkoff, when he landed there and had these deals there, he understood the gravity of situation. It is easier to say that, Russia is kind of taking a hit and its economy is not so good as what they have been stating on their own media channels. But when Witkoff lands in Moscow and sees the actual reality on ground, he will probably understand that the impact of the war is worse off on Ukraine and the NATO supporting nations that are there than on Moscow itself. So maybe Witkoff has given a reality check to its team, and they have said that, okay, maybe we need to reanalyze exactly how strongly positioned we are and how much of an ally we need Russia to be, so that the new global order has space for USA. Otherwise, there is quite a big chance that Russia, India, and China together, the RIC Trioca, would push away this old hegemony of USA and its European allies into a corner and show them exactly who are the masters of the new world.
Yes. Thank you very much, Shruti, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. On the morning of August 15, a Russian drone strike hit a gas station near the city of Sumy, damaging civilian vehicles and sparking a fire. The attack has carried out around 5:40 a.m. local time, targeted cars on the station premises, injuring a driver who suffered burns, while staff escaped unharmed. Regional authorities said the strike also damaged a nearby multi-story residential building. Police and firefighters quickly arrived, documenting the scene and launching an investigation under Article 438 of Ukraine's Criminal Code in possible war crimes. 2 vehicles were confirmed damaged, and the State Emergency Service released footage showing the fire being extinguished. Highlighting coordinated emergency efforts, the area remains under heightened security, with law enforcement, emergency services, and local authorities all working together. Officials' updates on the investigations are expected from the National Police and Prosecutor's Office as inquiries continue. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert. Thank you, Shruti, for staying with us. Now, how might this ongoing investigation shape the narrative around the talks taking place tonight, if it has any effects?
That's a very good question, Asuma. I understand that every time there is a peace talk on table, whoever is involved, whether Zelensky is part of it or not, Russia always takes on an aggressive stance and shows you that I'm not coming to the peace table as a beggar with a bowl in my hand. I'm coming from a position of power. And this it shows by repeated attacks on Ukrainian soils and kind of suppressing it. Now, Ukraine, on the other side, presents Putin and Russia as the giant aggressor of the world, a giant threat to humanity. And that is when they start documenting all of these things under war crimes, so that any peace that comes through any talk is marred by this narrative that they have made peace with a war criminal and they've made peace with a very aggressive nation at the cost of Ukraine. So it is more of a narrative war from both sides, Russia and Ukraine, when they talk about these incidents. This is not the first time a drone attack would have happened. It is not the last time it would happen, until and unless the peace deal is inked. So it is more of how to shape the world imagery, the perception of what the peace is going to cost and who is more powerful at the talking table. These are just small indicators of how it is going to be put forth. Russia is saying that I come from power, and Ukraine is presenting itself as the victim.
Thank you very much, Shruti Dasgupta, for joining us today and sharing your insight throughout this topic. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Taipei's top China policymaker has said that Taiwan's people should spurn China's events to commemorate the end of the World War II, given Chinese distortion of history and threats against the island. This comes as China, which views Taiwan as its own territory, invited Taiwanese veterans who fought against Japan to the parade next month, which will be overseen by President Xi Jinping. According to reports, Taiwan has denounced China for using this year's 80th anniversary of the war's end for political purposes against Taipei, saying Beijing has falsely claimed it was the Communist Party that led the fighting against Japan rather than the Republic of China's government, which at time ruled China. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council Minister Chiu Chui-cheng has also said that the People's Republic of China did not even exist during World War II. Now for this discussion, we are joined by Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from London. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, Taiwan has criticized China's attempt to politicize World War II commemoration events. How do you see China's invitation and how do you see Taiwan's response?
Well, this is a pivotal moment in history where the devastation and suffering of humankind as a result of the Second World War has now been being revisited, especially in China, because at that time China was very weak. It came after China was partitioned by various Western powers and following by the invasion by Japan, occupying about a third of Japan, when the government of the day, which is the Republic of China, the Kuomintang, it was extremely corrupt and very unpopular with its people, and that led to the uprising and influence of the Chinese Communist Party, catering for the suffering of the vast majority of the Chinese people, and they rose up in arms to fight the Japanese as well. But of course they were very well ill-equipped, whereas the Kuomintang was equipped by the American armament, and some of the soldiers were trained. And then the nationalists, the Kuomintang, took advantage of these military equipment and training to drive out the communists. There was a kind of witch hunt of all the communist elements, while at the same time there was a Japanese invasion, and then creating huge suffering and great devastation and loss of human lives, women and children across the land. And of course the Kuomintang had some wins against the Japanese, but I think that the war against Japan's invasion was tilted by also to a great extent by all the guerrillas, the uprising of the people across the land, organized by the communists. And then, of course, there's also great suffering of lives and sacrifices. So I think that at the end of the day, the Japanese were bogged down largely, and also there was with losses in the Asia Pacific because of the after the Pearl Harbor debacle, and then the Americans were pushing back the Japanese. So I think that all parties had a role to play. But of course, the Chinese Communist Party organizing the people of China across the land to oppose the Japanese through guerrilla tactics, bogging down the Japanese, and also had scored major victories against the Japanese army, is a game changer in the history of fighting against the Japanese. And that's something which, of course, the Chinese government is celebrating and is commemorating to show that in front against foreign aggression, the united forces of the Chinese people is always able to win the day.
And Andrew, now building on your answer, do you think could this tension over historical accuracy complicate potential dialogue or reconciliation between Taiwan and China?
Well, I think that this reconciliation can only happen when Taiwan is formerly part of China, which has always been tracing back hundreds of years in China's history. And don't forget that as far back as the Ming Dynasty, that was before the Qing Dynasty, in the 1600s, Taiwan was already ruled by the Ming Dynasty with the Chinese general, the Jiang Chenggong, stationed in Taiwan. And also after the Nixon visit to China, formalizing the normal diplomatic relationship between the United States and the People's Republic of China under Mao Zedong, Taiwan was de-recognized as a nation by the United Nations and recognizing Beijing instead. So there was a one China policy, and of course the Americans took advantage of the opportunity to introduce the Taiwan Relations Act, empowering the American government to continue to supply arms to Taiwan to defend itself, but without committing the United States to be engaged in a war against mainland China. So I think that the United States government continues to place the Taiwan card, and then pushing the envelope. For example, the last Nancy Pelosi visit resulted in a huge military exercises surrounding Taiwan, and this time around, under the new leader in Taiwan, which is known to be a separatist, there are dangers in the fracturing of further relations. And of course, Beijing always wants Taiwan to reunite with the motherland peacefully, and exemplified by a series of white papers issued during the past several decades, the last coinciding with the visit of Nancy Pelosi's provocative visit to Taiwan, but always stressing the importance of peaceful unifications as the two territories. The people are increasingly visiting each other in terms of travel, and a lot of Taiwanese businesses or young people establishing their businesses on the mainland, and of course the mainland also businesses interacting with Taiwan's. And then, of course, the Taiwan economy depends hugely on the mainland. So all these dynamics are going to translate into closer ties between the two people, unless, of course, the Taiwan leaders struck this kind of pro-independence movement combined with provocative acts by the United States, and that could trigger some kind of a conflict over the Taiwan Straits, which is to nobody's benefit.
Yes.
So I think that we've got to watch this space very carefully.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. China's Defense Ministry has accused the Philippines Coast Guard of dangerous maneuvers following reports of a collision earlier this week between two Chinese vessels near the disputed Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. Spokesperson Jiang Bin said the action seriously endangered the safety of Chinese vessels and personnel. And they further warned that China reserves the right to take necessary countermeasures. Jiang did not confirm or deny the collision, but Philippine footage showed a Chinese Coast Guard ship trailing a PCG vessel before a Chinese Navy ship cut across another Chinese vessel, colliding with it and damaging its forecastle. It was the first known crash between Chinese vessels in the area. Manila has denied responsibility, calling it an unfortunate outcome not caused by their actions. The Philippines said its ships were delivering supplies to fishermen when the incident occurred. The clash is the latest in a series of confrontations amid heightened tensions, with China continuing to reject a 2016 International Tribunal ruling that invalidated its expansive claims in the South China Sea. Now for this discussion, we go back to Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from London. Thank you, Andrew, for staying with us. Now, how do you interpret this China's response to the collision near Scarborough Shoal, especially regarding its accusation of dangerous maneuvers by Philippine Coast Guards?
Well, China could never compromise on its sovereignty. claims over these islands, which of course is based on historical records trading back to thousands of years of China's influence and control of some of these islands. And of course, this also ties in with the fact that the other China's neighbors have also claimed these islands or took action to occupy some of these islands during the past decades. Now, as far as the Philippines is concerned, you can see that there is a kind of a swinging of the pendulum for one side or another, from pro-China to anti-China, depending on the change of the administration in the Philippines. The current Philippine administration is anti-China with the young Marcos administration. But then before him, the Duterte administration is very pro-China. And then before Duterte, Aquino was again anti-China. So again, it depends on the biggest geopolitical player in the region, which of course the United States. Again, the policies towards China, of course, swinging from one end to the other. For example, during the previous administration, the first Bush administration, and then there was China was helped to gain entry into the World Trade Organization. There was a great period of cooperation, and now increasingly there was a pivot to Asia, and there was a more anti-China kind of stance, and that translates into Americans' allies. Of course, the Philippines have got a defense treaty with the United States, and hence that translates into a kind of jigsaw, a kind of a swing of the pendulum in the Philippines. Now, as far as these clashes are concerned, under the Marcos administration is taking a more proactive stance,
yes.
As the United States is trying to ally Philippines, South Korea,
yes.
Japan to contain China in that part of over the South China Sea, particularly in the light of possible upheaval over Taiwan, bearing in mind that the Philippines is very close to Taiwan and the south of Taiwan. And so it forms a kind of military partnership, if not an alliance, with South Korea and Japan, along with, for example, the AUKUS, Australia, United Kingdom, and America, nuclear submarine deal south of,
yes.
of the South China Sea. And then, of course, further north is the so-called first island chain centered in Okinawa, and the second island chain further east, centered in Guam, with a lot of American assets and with the deployment of American Sixth Fleet. So yes. You can see that the whole area is a hotbed for possible conflicts. And the latest crash is, of course, that China would never concede in infringement of its sovereignty. And then, of course, accidents like this do happen.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today and sharing your insight as a China strategist all the way from London. Now we move on to our next news. China has urged Cambodia and Thailand to continue efforts towards restoring peace at their border as soon as possible, according to a Chinese Foreign Ministry statement today. Summarizing a trilateral meeting a day earlier, in this statement, China reiterated its support for the Southeast Asian nations to uphold the consensus they arrived at recently and achieve a sustainable ceasefire. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his Thai and Cambodian counterparts on Thursday for a discussion. Now for this discussion, we go back to Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist, joins us live from London. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us today. What's your take on this news between about China?
Well, Thailand and Cambodia, if
yes.
you look at the map, sits at the crossroad of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is China's pivot to the west of China through Central Asia and then through even Russia to connect with Europe over the that part overland of the Silk Road, the Belt and Road, the economic belts. And then apart from this conduit all the way to Central Asia, there are economic corridors pointing southwards. And one of the economic corridor passes through Pakistan, and another one passes through Thailand, and also through to the peninsula, linking all these economies together through China's investment, through China's trade. And so it behoves of China and these neighboring countries to establish a more peaceful relationship with each other, because any kind of conflict and disruptions are no good for these countries themselves and also for China. And also, as far as Cambodia is concerned, also is a hotbed for certain criminal gangs linked with drugs and so on. Again, that's a huge problem for China because these gangs resort to using digital technology, using mobile phone scams and so on, and then allied with some corrupt members of the military. And as far as Thailand is concerned, it's also a conduit for drugs and things like that. So I think the stability of the region requires a more stable relationship, but also building trade links so that the economy in these countries are more aligned with economic development, businesses, rather than illegitimate activities like drugs and even terrorism. So hence this
Yes.
Wang Yi's call for a more stable relationship between these two countries.
Yes. Thank you very much, Andrew K. Belong, for sharing that insight as a China strategist. Now,